Do you go for Kane or Salah? Are we picking Joao Pedro? And who is the best goalkeeper to start with? These are all my final thoughts going into Game Week 1. So starting things out then, I'm going to talk about the goalkeepers, and I'm going to look at the Draft Hound's top goalkeepers for expected points to try and help you decide on who the best goalkeeper is. Now, Ederson, interestingly, comes in at number 1. He's got 11.1 expected points, which is actually considerably more than any of the other goalkeepers. The thing with me and Ederson, certainly last season we didn't get along, but realistically, he doesn't get saves bonus at all, and you're reliant solely on Man City keeping clean sheets. I just have a feeling with the extended game time, obviously they're going to play the full time, or add the full time to add a time that the ball is off the pitch during regular play. I just think there's going to be slightly less clean sheets this season, and Man City in general didn't keep that many. They had a good defence, but they did let in, seemed to be a goal every game. So with that happening, without the saves bonus, whilst he might be there for expected points based on clean sheet odds for Man City, I'm not actually sure he's the best keeper. Steele from Brighton is in second. I really like him, but with Verbruggen on the wings as well, he's obviously been signed, in my opinion at least, to be their first choice goalkeeper. I'm not sure how many games Steele is going to play. I think he might start game week 1, but even then, I think it's a bit of a risk. I prefer to pick a goalkeeper with a security of starts. The same with Ramsdale, really, with Raya signing on loan from Brentford. Kepa, I know Sanchez is signed for Chelsea now. Alisson, I think he's just a bit too expensive at 5.5 million. I really quite like Martinez, but Villa have a reasonably tough run of fixtures to kick things off. I definitely like Onana, I like Johnston, I like Pickford. Flecken, look at some of the mistakes that he made in the Bundesliga. He famously let a goal in while he was behind his own goal line. So a player took a shot inside the box and he was stood inside his goal. I think he was having a drink or something because he got distracted. Absolutely ridiculous. You've got to check that clip out. It certainly made me lose a bit of faith in Flecken. And then Pope as well is a good option, but Newcastle have such a tough start. So I think based off this, my top 3 goalkeepers to start the season with are Onana, Pickford and Johnston. Now, just to have a look at these players in a bit more detail, looking at Onana first, well, obviously we know that Man United and De Gea won the Golden Glove last season. They kept the most clean sheets in the league. I also think with the way that he plays, with Rashford running in behind and obviously the right winger for Man United doing the same, I reckon he could get a couple of assists this season just playing a long ball in behind to the strikers. Also, just in general, I don't think any of the Man United defenders are amazing for attacking returns. Now, don't get me wrong, Luke Shaw is good from an attacking perspective, but he didn't light the world up in terms of attacking returns, which makes me think perhaps saving 0.5 million on him and going for Onana as your, Man United defensive asset could be the way to go. Obviously, Onana wasn't playing in the Premier League last season, so comparing him to De Gea is a little bit difficult, and obviously Man United defence to Inter, but realistically, there's not a whole lot to separate the two goalkeepers. Onana has a slightly better saves percentage, and I just think the fact that he's better on the ball would allow Man United to keep possession more and ultimately keep more clean sheets. I think the teams that have, the best expected goals conceded and lowest goals conceded stats, for example, are the ones that keep the ball more. And I think Onana, with his passing ability, Man United are going to be keeping the ball more. So I actually think their clean sheets could well go up on last season. And looking at the stats, Onana makes pretty similar level number of saves for Inter that De Gea did for Man United, and his saves percentage is actually a little bit better. I mentioned Sam Johnston. I think he's probably the best 4.5 million goalkeeper. We've seen, Roy Hodgson did an interview this week saying Guaita is refusing to play for Crystal Palace, which obviously now makes Sam Johnston, in my opinion, the first choice keeper under Roy, or for Palace. Palace in general have good defensive stats under Roy Hodgson. The only thing is, when they did play under Roy last season, they had a pretty easy run of fixtures, so it's a good sample size, but in terms of the actual fixture difficulty, they didn't really play many tough games, so it's difficult to say how good they're going to be defensively across a whole season. I do expect him to keep some clean sheets though, and just with the way that Crystal Palace play, they do concede shots, so I do expect him to get a good amount of saves as well. He basically kept, made 3 saves per game last season, which is a good total. It's nearly achieving bonus pretty much every game, and at the moment, I don't know how this has happened, but he's only 1.8% owned, so not really thinking too differential, but 1.8% ownership, you could get ahead if he gets off to a good start. Now, next up, we've got Jordan Pickford. Now, I just feel like Everton are going to improve a little bit defensively under Sean Dyche having a full pre-season. Also, just another point, it seems like Sean Dyche goalkeepers have a track record of doing quite well in FPL. Thinking back to Nick Pope and Tom Heaton that he had when he was manager of Burnley. Also, Everton have a really strong set of opening fixtures, and I think he was the top goalkeeper in the league for saves per 90 last season, 3.32. He's almost getting those saves bonus points every season. So if you combine the fact that I think they'll improve a little bit defensively just because they've had a full pre-season under Sean Dyche, also the fact they get off to a good start of opening fixtures, I feel like he could score well, certainly in the opening game weeks. I mean, just my opinion, you look at his saves percentage compared to Johnston and Onana, 77 last season for Onana, 76 for Johnson, and 71 for Pickford. He's not quite as good in terms of that, so maybe that's the only kind of thing that lets him down. But in terms of total saves, he made probably the most last season in the Premier League. I think he could be a good option. All right, next up then, we've got Joao Pedro. Now, I've made a list of pros and a list of cons, and I'm going to leave it up to you whether you go for him in your team. At the moment, I've got him in my draft because I really like the thought of being able to captain Mo Salah in game week 2, and as it says here in one of the pros, Joao Pedro allows you to do that. But I'm not going to say that's the way you should play it. I think you should take in the pros and the cons yourself and make that decision. First up on the pros then, he took a penalty in pre-season with Pascal Gross on the pitch. Now, most of us probably thought with McAllister gone, Gross would be back on penalties for Brighton. It looks like Joao Pedro is. He also signed for a club record fee and he wears the number 9 shirt. Now, I didn't read too much into squad numbers, but a club record signing, number 9 shirt, makes me think he's expected at least to start the first few games. Brighton in general have 3 fantastic opening fixtures. They got Luton, Wolves and West Ham as their opening 3. Just looking at the fixtures there, they're fantastic. And also, I just think 5.5 million is unbelievable value for the upside that he has, particularly over those 2 games. Like last season, if there was a Brighton, midfielder you could back to play for 5.5 million, you'd be straight on it. So yeah, I really like the idea of Joao Pedro in your team. And if it doesn't work, there are other players around his price point, or I think by the time that he sort of gets himself out of the team, if that does happen, we'll probably be sitting on a couple of free transfers anyway, and that will allow you to make a change somewhere else in your team to afford to upgrade Joao Pedro to someone else. Now, I think the cons are obvious for most people really, but looking at his stats in the Championship last season, obviously he played for Watford in the Championship, they're not groundbreaking, 15 attacking returns in 35 games is nothing to write home about, but his mentality at Watford was not great. I mean, I think as soon as Watford got relegated a couple of seasons ago, he wanted out and they just didn't sell him. Same with Ismail Assar, so he wasn't motivated. I remember seeing him, I'm a Bristol City season ticket holder myself, and I remember seeing him playing for Watford, and he showed like sparks of quality, but he overall just looked like he couldn't be bothered. Like he wasn't tracking back as much as he probably should have done, etc, etc. He wasn't looking like he wanted to be there. Another thing with him, I think he'll probably be playing the number 10 role as opposed to actually the out-and-out striker. I know he's wearing the 9 shirt, but I think in pre-season he's been adopting the number 10 role because obviously Brighton have Ferguson and Welbeck to play up front. And also, there's a bit of competition for that number 10 position, namely Enciso, who a lot of us had in our draft at the start when the game actually first launched. So, yeah, there's going to be some rotation there, I reckon, especially when they get into Europe. But look at those first 3 fixtures. I don't think there are any other competitions mixed in. Luton, Wolves and West Ham, fantastic opening fixtures. I think he's a good option. Okay, now a little bit about Kane and Mo Salah now. Now, it's looking like Kane is going to stay at Spurs and Mo Salah has been absolutely smashing it in pre-season. And like I said, I think he's a genuine captaincy option in game week 2. So thought I'd do a little feature comparing the 2 players and then show you a draft with each of them and a draft without them, just so you get an idea of maybe the way to play it. So with Harry Kane, if you look on the left, so that's the expected points according to Draft Hound for Harry Kane. On the right is obviously Salah's expected points. Across the opening fixtures, I think Salah pips Kane for every single game for expected points. Just one thing to consider, I wouldn't say hang your hat on it, but it's just a piece of analysis really to look at. And then the stats below are the goals and assists and total points, etc. for last season. Salah, whilst he didn't score as many goals as Kane, made a lot more assists and his expected goals were actually slightly higher. Kane, I think he has a track record really of overperforming his expected goal stats because he is such an elite finisher. But when you look at the underlying numbers, Salah actually had a better season than Kane and his expected returns per 90 were actually better. Also considering the fact you'll get a point for Liverpool clean sheets and you'll get more points for goals from Salah. I think he probably is a better option than Kane, to be honest. And also, just with the uncertainty around Kane, there's always the risk that the transfer could happen after the season starts. But at the moment, it's looking like he's going to stay at Bayern. But, you know, if the season starts and then Bayern offer a ridiculous sum of money, enough to make Tottenham accept it, that's obviously a risk of happening. Whereas Salah, I think he's locked on to stay at Liverpool. Doesn't seem to be any links to him going to any other clubs. A bit of chat about Saudi, but I don't think he's going to go there just yet. I think Salah is the safer and probably better pick. So what I thought it would be useful to look at next is a draft with each of Salah and Kane in it and one without them, just to see how they do for expected points and the kind of structure and what you can fit in. So this is the team, well, certainly my favourite team I've been able to build with Salah in it. Obviously relies on the man I spoke about, Joao Pedro, in order to build it, being up front. I think this team in general is really balanced, and the bench itself is actually not too bad. You could probably replace Henry with any other 4.5 million defender. I actually think he's a doubt to start game week 1, so for that reason you can go for someone else. There are plenty of 4.5 million defensive options and plenty of YouTubers as well with videos talking about them, so I'm not going to go through that in detail. And Kabore on the bench, just because he's playing wing back for Luton and probably going to start more games than Baldock. He's my pick there. As for the rest of this team, though, I think it's really, really strong. 61.2 expected points for the Salah draft. To make the Kane draft is relatively easy. Because Salah and Kane are the same price, you simply switch Mubama and Salah for Kane and Elliot Anderson from Newcastle. I think Elliot Anderson's probably the best 4.5 million midfielder. You can see there, comparing the expected points, the Salah draft 61.2 and the Kane draft 60.4 for the opening game week. So that for me suggests, again, that the Salah draft is probably better. Thing is with the Kane draft, though, is that you can have 3 players that play on the bench rather than the Salah draft, is a bit of a risk because you've got to pick a 4.5 million striker. So just one thing to think about there. You can have a 4.5 million defender, a 4 million defender that plays, and there are plenty of 4.5 million midfielders that play as well, namely Nakamba and Elliot Anderson. So, I mean, you can take the pick yourself, but these are some example drafts with the 2 players in. And if you want to go without Salah or Kane, that's fine as well. The expected points are ridiculously close between the 2 drafts, so it really is a coin flip as to whether you want to select Salah or Kane or go without, really. This is the draft without them. Onana, Chilwell, Gabriel, Estupinian, Martinelli, Bruno, Saka and Bumo, Rashford. I really like Ollie Watkins now as that second striker, alongside, of course, Erling Haaland. That one gets you 61.2 expected points in game week 1. Obviously, the Kane draft 60.4, so non-Kane or Salah is better than this one. And then it's exactly the same as the Salah draft. So, yeah, just one thing to think about really with these teams. It's basically a flip of a coin, I think, as to whether you go Kane or Salah. Sorry, there isn't a definitive answer. Maybe there is, though, because I think the real differentiator between going for Salah or without him, because in my opinion, I think Salah is slightly better than Kane, is whether you'd captain Salah in game week 2. I think if you would, because obviously Haaland's got Newcastle at home and Salah has Bournemouth at home. That's obviously quite a contrast in fixtures. If you would captain Salah, I think I'd go with him. However, if you would just captain Haaland against Newcastle, I think you should build this team instead. Alright, and that's the end of the video. Summarising there my final thoughts. So on your goalkeeper, whether you go for Joao Pedro, whether you go for Kane, whether you go for Haaland, or whether you go without. I think those are the final decisions that await most players, basically. Got 1 day left to go. So if you enjoyed the video, please leave me a like rating and subscribe to the Goal to Goal channel. You can catch me live a couple of hours before the deadline on Friday. I'll be really excited to have you there. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.